Hello, 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 and welcome to today's episode of Her Version. This podcast is dedicated to sharing stories of struggle to triumph, a platform that allows individuals to tell their truth in order to inspire and uplift others. For those of you that are new to this podcast and like content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button, follow, like, and share. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria. Let's jump right in. Hello, and thank you for joining us today for this episode of Her Version. Thank you for those of you that are already jumping on live. We appreciate that. If you are watching this on the replay, make sure you hashtag replay so that we know where you are watching us at and we can show you some love. The Her Version platform is built on storytelling and the understanding that many times our greatest learning experiences come from listening to other people's stories. Today, I'm speaking with an amazing woman named Rebecca Jo Rushdy. Rebecca is a global citizen and spent her childhood in Los Angeles, New York, Hong Kong, Shanghai, and Japan. Today, she is here to talk about how the life-changing magic of tidying up transformed her life and how she went from a depressed, suicidal shopaholic to now being able to guide others to live their life to the fullest and define their joy. She will be explaining how letting go with gratitude is a basic life skill that unfortunately we aren't taught, and how clutter is a universal problem. Totally agree with that. And how getting to the root cause of the issue liberates us versus surface level tidying that does not change behavioral patterns. Yes, totally agree. She is proud to say she is the first KonMari certified consultant in Malaysia. Guide others truly sparks joy wherever they may be in the world. Welcome, Rebecca. How are you?
Thank you so much, Sabrina, for the warm welcome. I'm so excited to be here today.
What a great topic. Literally every person in the universe probably could use a lot of this information. It's so funny because while I'm reading, I'm like, what is this girl's niche? Like, who is she helping? Literally everybody. Like, how do you even niche down on this?
You know, how I do is all about aligning with people, my dream clients. I mean, I could serve everybody, but it's
Yes.
all about aligning myself with people I actually want to work with, people who are ready for change. And that makes my job so much easier as well. So I think that was my perspective shift.
I love it. I love
Yeah,
it.
everyone needs it, but not everyone is ready for it. I'm sure you need that all the time as well.
Yes, 100%, definitely. I feel like I don't even know. Like, I consider myself a very organized person. I was on your website, and I've watched the Netflix special for
Yeah.
KonMari. Is that how you pronounce that? KonMari? Yeah.
Yeah.
So my drawers are actually looking pretty legit after watching all of her stuff. I think I saw it maybe a year or two ago. I don't even know, but was super inspired by her and her concept. But yeah, I mean, there's always issues in our house, right? There's areas we, clean things, and then there's always areas that end up back where they were previously, which is why I totally want to kind of dive into the behavioral patterns that
Oh, yeah.
that we were talking about in the intro, because I didn't even really necessarily know that was a thing. But before we do that, I want to dive into, I'm assuming, the obvious reason why you jumped into this niche or this, area of coaching. But I'm wondering about your story, your past, your journey. Um, a pivot that happened in your life to get you to where you were, to where you are now. If you could share some of that.
Oh, absolutely. So, I grew up in a relatively actually a very tidy household. My parents both grew up in Japan, so my mom was always super tidy, like veering on OCD actually. So we had that sort of environment to grow up in. But it wasn't until I came across Marie Kondo's book, which is called The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. This was about, I would say, nearly 10 years ago. I came across the translated version of her book. And I was pregnant at that time with my first child, and I went into turbo nesting mode. So I just went crazy. I was like, I read it. I was like, oh my gosh, I've been tidying wrong my entire life. So after I did my own place, then I was like, I still had that itch. So I started helping, friends and family as well. And what I realized was that it was just such a simple but profound shift. You're not decluttering to eliminate things from your life, but when you're looking at it from the perspective of gratitude, then you're looking at what you want to keep in your life. And this philosophy spills over into all other areas as well, because it's not just our stuff. It's about what kind of people do you want to be surrounded by, right? Like sometimes I think a lot of times people are tolerating jobs that don't serve them, relationships that are toxic, all that kind of stuff because we feel like we have to. And by practicing letting go with gratitude, this actually helps us to let go in all other areas of our life as well. So that being said, after I decluttered my own home, I started to realize that there were so many other things that I needed to let go of, the limiting belief, the self-doubt, and then I had also mentioned as well that, I've had depression and anxiety since I was 11 years old, and, suicide attempts in my teenage years as well. And so that was actually what spawned my shopaholic tendencies, because it became my coping mechanism, my self-regulation tool, which is really maladaptive. And then when I was able to embrace the KonMari method and start seeking joy, aligning yourself with joy and gratitude in your life, then it just makes it that much easier. You start to slowly build back that sense of self-worth again. And then you're able to align yourself with the things that are actually good for you. So this is one of the little phenomenons of KonMari as well, where we call it extreme KonMari side effects. So people who complete the entire, we call it tidying festival, because in Japanese, it's a direct translation. So what Marie Kondo, she calls it tidying festival. In Japanese, it's called katatsuke matsuri. So it means that you're decluttering your entire home. But why is she calling it a festival? There's a lot of positive psychology infused in it. So we're not looking at it from the dreaded task of decluttering your home. It's something that's festive, something to look forward to. I like to describe it as, it's like having a date with yourself. You're developing a deeper relationship and conversation with yourself, because every little thing, every trivial thing that you might deem trivial thing in your home actually has a backstory attached to it, right? Like you might have purchased that when you were in a bad mood, or you're feeling impulsive, or maybe that sales lady, or it was like a friend who might be doing MLM stuff, like you might have felt pressured into buying something, right?
Yeah.
So there's like a lot of emotions attached to it. So when we're not just flippantly letting go of something, we're able to be like, hey, you know what? Like I felt pressured into buying this, but I now know that I can actually just use my voice and say, oh, thanks, but no thanks. I can refer you to other friends,
Yeah.
So when we're able to be able to own that as well, and then be more aligned in everything that we do, it just shifts the needle in the right direction of where we truly want to go. Joy is defined by you. And that's what this method ultimately is about. You are defining what joy means to you, and it looks different for each and every one of us. So it's not about Pinterest perfect, right?
Yeah. When you came across this method,
Mhm.
what was the shift? Because I'm sure it wasn't like from one day to the next you were perfect, right? You
Mhm,
got
mhm.
everything. I'm sure there
Yeah.
was an evolution or some steps that you took to really um as you were talking about the behavioral patterns, really start to
Mhm.
break those patterns. What were some of the steps that you took to go from where you were to like a consistent, home that's
Yeah.
zen and light and organized?
That's a great question. I always like to compare it like similar to exercising, It's not like, oh, you finish this one course, like this package, and then you're fit for life. You actually have to keep on continuing it. So we talked about Tiding Festival, which is the foundation. That's the groundwork that you put in. But after that is joy checking. That's the maintenance. So I have two young kids at home. They're 8 and 6, and they've been KonMari since they're 2 years old. But typically, we joy check every 2 to 3 months, just because they're physically growing out of their clothes, their belongings, and it's the same for adults as well. Things that have served us 6 months ago might not. Maybe it doesn't necessarily serve us anymore. So when we're constantly checking in on ourselves, that's why I call it like you're having a date with yourself. Like it's nothing to be, it's nothing to try to push off or delay, because it can be something really fun. You just quickly check through, like how you said, when your drawers are organized, like how it is, you're not trying to rifle through the things. You just have a quick glance. And you're just like, you know what, that t-shirt, I haven't worn that in a while. I kept it last time, but now I'm ready to let go.
Got
So
it.
that makes it so much easier. And you're actually, for all entrepreneurs out there as well, time is a commodity, right? And everyone always says that you don't have enough time, but when your space is supporting you, when you're not looking for things, you're not stressing yourself out. These are all things within our control. There's so many things that are out of our control, but when your home is, when everything is stable, you can find things when you need to. When the kids ask me for things, I'll say, okay, go into this drawer. It's on the left-hand side. Go get it yourself. You're actually saving so much and creating extra bandwidth for you to focus on the things that actually matter.
Yeah, I can totally see that. What
Mhm.
are some of the behavioral patterns that you are noticing within clients that they have that are keeping them from being able to keep their house tidy? Because, like you said, like we all clean our house, right? Like we all
Mhm.
go through like spring cleaning things where we put everything in the right place and
Mhm.
we are vowing to finally this time.
Mm.
And then 3 months later, it's no longer. So,
Yeah.
what are some of the patterns that you're seeing that people are taking with them and that's causing all this chaos?
Well, okay, so one of the biggest questions that I get is what do I do about, husband, mother, kids, so on and so forth, especially when you live with multiple members in a household as well. This is where we train the individuals. So language matters a lot. So again, we're putting a positive spin on it rather than saying, why can't you put stuff away? How many times have I told you already? It creates that negative sentiment. They are actually going to not want to do what you're telling them to do, right? This is just human behavior. So rather than doing it, I say, hey, could you put it back into its home? Or like, hey, I noticed that the cup is on the table. Do you know where it belongs? Whatever it might be. So when we're able to communicate more effectively to the different members of the family, then it's neutral, and then they're going to be able to put it back. You have to remind them, like you can't expect change overnight, and you are building upon muscle memory. So then the more it's practice, then it becomes autopilot. But it starts from us. We have to actually manage our own expectations as well. If you're looking for a miraculous change overnight, then you're going to be severely disappointed, right?
Yeah.
And then that's where you give up really easily. It's the same with like working out. You're not going to reach your goal overnight.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things that I saw on I think it was your Instagram,
Mhm.
was like a handful of pictures of like let's say pots and pans.
Yeah.
Um where I noticed there's like one of everything. So I'm thinking of my cupboard, for instance, where
Mhm.
I have like 2, 3, maybe even 4
Mhm.
like small skillets and then medium
Oh.
skillets and
Mhm.
then boiling pots that
Yeah.
are somewhat identical in size, just like a
Yeah.
different color or something. What's your advice on that? Like in my mind, I don't know, like in case one gets scraped, in
Mhm.
case one's dirty,
Yeah.
in case I need multiples. What's like your thought process on that?
Okay, so typically the method actually requires you to grab all the things under the same category as well, so that you have a mental audit of everything that you own. So it sounds like you know how many pots and pans that you own, just from how you were describing it just now. But what you would do is first you select the one that you love, the one that sparks joy, the one that you instinctively reach for, right?
Okay.
And then
Yep.
that's your barometer of joy, or like purpose in this case. Because sometimes, like, a vacuum might not necessarily spark joy, or a mop might not spark joy, but does it serve a purpose? And then you're able to go into it. It's like, okay, this one will be my backstock, right? Like, that's my spare in case I need to upgrade it. And if you can confidently say that everything serves a purpose, then keep it. There's no right number for it, because you might be like this avid cook who just uses a lot of pots and pans, right? For some other households, maybe they only need one of each. So we define what that so-called perfect number looks like to each of us. But I will actually advise clients as well, don't keep it solely based on fear, like a lot of
That's what
times
I
we're,
feel like it would be. It would be fear, like,
yeah,
once this one gets scratched,
yeah,
then I'll toss it, and then I'll have this one, but then
mhm,
sometimes they do get scratched, and
yeah,
then I still have it, and
yeah,
still still use it, so then the so-called backup one, you
hmm,
know, isn't used as much. So, yeah, a lot of the stuff, if I'm thinking about my kitchen per se,
hmm,
is fear, like spatulas. Like I probably have like 16 spatulas and
yeah,
like they're all in the same spot. They're very organized in the same
yeah,
little area, you know.
hmm,
But yeah, I probably only use maybe 3 of them.
yeah. And then you just have to be really realistic with yourselves. Like, how many do I actually need? Um, it's like what we are saying earlier as well. For some people, they might go from 13 to be like, okay, I only need 3. But for some people, it might be more of a gradual process as well. You might be like, you know what, like I can just give these to a thrift shop, or you might know someone who's like, a college student or someone who's moving into a new home. You're like, oh, you know what, like take some of the things from my kitchen so you can fit out your new kitchen. And so I really believe that a lot of the times, like we need to have that avenue to give, and it makes it a lot easier, because when we don't know where to give it, then we're just like, oh, you know what, never mind, I'll just keep it for now.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Do any of your clients decide to like have a garage sale or eBay versus
Hmm.
taking it to Goodwill? Like what's the thought process on that?
Oh, there are some, but I would say you have to be committed to it. So just be realistic. Is it worth your time? Are you actually going to do it? Or are you just saying it? Like, because again, it's like a scarcity mindset thing, right? Like people will be like, oh, these cost so much money. It's such a waste. I don't want to, just give it away. I want to sell it, recoup some of my losses on it. And then I have people, it's like, they keep it for so long. And then after, gosh, year plus a couple years, and then they'll text me to say, like, you know what, I never got around to it. Now I'm dropping it off at Goodwill. So I never actually, so that's part of being a KonMari consultant as well. We can't actually force people to let go of things, because it has to be on your own accord. Because that's where we're there to guide people through it, but the decision making lies on the individual. So then they
Okay.
feel empowered through it. So it's not just this deep gratitude practice, but it also builds a lot of confidence as well, because you're forced to make decisions. And I've worked with a lot of women who struggle with this. Because, typically speaking, from around the age of 7 or 8 years old, you already develop the people pleasing tendencies. Your opinion doesn't matter, right? You're trying to please the adults in your life. And what happens, what that evolves into later on in life is that you're so afraid of making decisions. So, we all have friends like that, right? Like you ask them like, oh, where do you want to eat? They're like, oh, wherever you want to eat. They're like, it's like something as basic as that. But when you actually cultivate that, it's also a part of the muscle training as well, the joy muscle training, to be able to honestly say what and decide what joy means to you. This is part of the practice. I can't say it on behalf of the client. Sometimes they'll be like, Rebecca, what do you think about this dress? I'm like, nope, go in front of the mirror, put up against you, and you make the decision. And they'll be able to tell. You have to listen to your inner voice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. I feel like that's one of the things that I have done probably over the last decade with shopping is making decisions very quickly. So, a lot of people that I've shopped with will stand in front of the mirror and kind of look at it and like,
Yeah.
for a good minute or so. For me, I put it on, I look, yes or no, just love it. I have to love it. If you don't love it immediately, then I don't buy it.
Yes.
And I think that that's really helped my closets over the last decade stay in a joyful state because everything in my closet I love. Versus it's on clearance or it's a pretty good deal or I like it in this color, so I might as well get it in that color. But one of the colors I liked a lot more, so I only wear that color and never even wear the other color. So yeah, I totally understand that concept and it makes sense. I want to ask, was there either for you or for any of your clients any limiting beliefs, like any belief systems that you see people hanging on to that are doing them a disservice towards the organizational aspect of their home or the, I don't want to say cleanliness, but it's kind of like cleanliness of their home?
Well, so Marikondo actually says like there's two types of, cleaning is an act of nature because dust accumulates, right? But organizing, that's a whole nother matter as well.
Okay.
So when we actually keep our space organized, cleaning it actually becomes effortless because your countertops, like, and this is something that I see a lot too, like whatever flat surface, if you don't have a designated home for the things that you're carrying, let's say that, you have a bunch of stuff that in your hand, what happens, the human tendency is that you just find any flat surface and you just put it down.
Yeah.
And then that becomes that dumping ground. And then also mirror neurons. So if you have multiple family members in the household, they will just start copying and adopting those habits as well. So I'll often say, start from yourself first. Like when people ask like, oh, what do? I have so many people in my house. They're not following. They can't keep it tidy. I'm like, start from yourself first because people will copy. Like, don't do it for them, but also use opportunities. It's so easy to see something on the table and you'll be like, oh, I'm just going to put it back for them. But it's doing them a disservice. So usually I'll just try to, for me, especially with my young kids too, I'll just be like, okay, I'll leave it there all day until they come back from school to be like, hey, do you know where that belongs? Do you think you can put it away? Whatever. So yeah, it's to, I would say like, in a household, you need to have a system in place and then be able to encourage other people as well to be able to follow that system. And then the cleanliness aspect, that becomes like second nature, like it's so much easier to do because you're not trying to dust around a table or a mantle that's filled with things.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. What is your thought process on children upholding these new techniques in their own space? What do you personally do?
Yeah. So this was something that I've had to work through as well because, you know, first is patience. Don't expect change overnight, right? And the second is just holding space for them as well. So I what I highly recommend for parents is don't make it about you. Depersonalize it because sometimes you victimize yourself like, oh, how could you make it so messy? Do you know how long it took me to tidy up, you know, all those kind of stuff. So a lot of times, and I'm guilty of this as well, it's so easy to layer that guilt upon children, but we never want people to be doing things simply out of guilt. So for the kids, I typically will link the feel good factor for them. You know, like let's say that their room is messy and I tell them like, oh, you know, when you came back home from school, how do you feel walking into your room? You know, and then versus, oh, the room is tidy now. How does that make you feel? So you're able to drill into the intrinsic values. So it's not just like, oh, I'm doing this because I'm trying to please my parents. You know, so they're able to feel like, oh, this is a life skill as well. It's something that's good for me, and it's a self-regulation tool. So this is a lot of times people feel like, oh, you know what, like, oh, it's one of the last things that they want to do, but decluttering is an act of self-care.
Yeah.
And it's so beautiful because my 8-year-old, you know, just like a couple weeks ago, she was like, she got pretty upset over something. I think something, she got to a fight with her little sister, and then she just started organizing her drawers. And that was what she needed, you know, because we talk about all the different tools, right, that we can reach for rather than screaming, fighting, you know, using physical force. It's like sometimes we need to walk away from certain situations, right? Like so that we don't blow up. So we are really big on helping them to connect with their mind body connection and the reactions as well, or the responsiveness too. And so tidying up your space, it's something that actually, and is scientifically proven too, it will lower your cortisol levels. Just 10 minutes of it, you know, it will actually help you to get closer and back to baseline. So when I do my corporate workshops as well, I always say to people, you know, we're in front of our screens all day long. Like oftentimes it's actually so detrimental. If you're starting to feel like you're starting to, you know, burn out or having writer's block, just take 10 minutes away. Go wash the dishes, go fold laundry, or put something away, declutter something. Just 10 minutes of that will actually calm your brain. And it's so simple, right? Like it might not be as fancy as, oh, going to get a massage or, you know, having a bubble bath, but it is equally as effective.
Wow, very cool. Where do you recommend people who are just overall just need some tidying up overall in their entire home? Where do you recommend people to start?
So the KonMari method, it actually advocates not to do by room, but by category. So it's really different from traditional organizing. So there's 5 categories in total. So the first one is clothing, books, paper. Komono means miscellaneous in Japanese. So it's essentially everything else under the sun. Like that's, you know, hobby items, your cleaning products, kitchen items, so on and so forth. And then the last category is sentimental items. And the reason why it's done like this is because you're essentially strengthening your joy checking muscles. So if you've never KonMari before, you know, because doing it from the perspective of joy and gratitude, it's very different from, oh, let's just chuck everything that has like a stain or a hole in it, right?
Okay.
So when you're doing it from the perspective of that, then we start with clothing first because that's the light workout. So I like to give fitness analogies because it's like working out your brain and you're getting used to a new way of thinking. And the final one is sentimental because that's the high intensity workout. So if you have never KonMari before and you start off with a high intensity workout, you're going to be setting yourself up for failure. So you start with clothing because your skin is the largest organ as well. So only you can decide whether that item of clothing sparks joy for you. It's not contingent on other people answering as well. So we start with our clothing because it's also something that we do is a daily activity. So when you feel the effects of, like how you said, when you open your drawer, everything's like file folded, it's all neat and tidy. You just feel like, right? Like you feel relieved, actually. You're not stressed. It actually will give you that boost of energy. So these are all little things that I love teaching my clients as well, because we delve into what are energy drainers and what are energy boosters. So decluttering, having a tidy home is an energy booster versus on the other hand, a cluttered environment actually raises your cortisol level. So it might not be, you might not have a full-on meltdown, but if you wake up and there's just clutter all over, you're already starting off the day on the wrong note. It's actually like almost like a leaky faucet, and that's your energy, so it's just dripping, dripping, dripping throughout the day until you feel like you're on low battery mode.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What do you think is the thought process, like for my situation? Room cleaned. It's very
Mm-hmm.
tidy. Drawers are very
Mm-hmm.
tidy. The only issue
Yeah.
that I really have is my nightstand top,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
which I just do that every Sunday. I just clear it out.
Yeah.
Kitchen tidy.
Yeah.
My office is a mess though.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
spend a lot of time in it, obviously.
Yeah.
I get a lot of joy when it is clean.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've got papers here, books there,
Mm-hmm.
pens, glue,
Yeah.
depending on what I'm working on. Sometimes I'm sewing stuff.
Yeah.
So, there's fabric sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what's your thoughts on that?
So do those items have a home as well?
Yes.
They do, right?
Labeled homes.
Mm.
Yeah.
Amazing. So it's just a matter of actually putting it back to where it belongs, right? Because this is why having a home for everything, it will actually, as you're, maybe it might just be for you linking it with a positive activity. Maybe it's like feel good music, or it might be listening to a podcast while you're resetting the room.
Okay.
So you feel like you're getting something else out of it as well, like habit stacking as well, right? So then when you're able to be like, oh, and when when you get into that flow, because you know where everything belongs, you're actually not wasting precious bandwidth thinking about where to put it. And that's the stumbling block. A lot of times people just kind of give up because they're like, oh, like holding a bunch of stuff, and they're like, I don't know where to put it because there's no defined home for it. And that actually wastes your reserve. And then so you'll just be like, you know what, I'm going to deal with it later. I'll put it on top. And don't get me wrong, like I also have dumping grounds, right? Like, life gets busy. It's a reality. But the main thing is you have that confidence to know that you can reset it. And it's just about putting it into practice and just viewing it as a self-care as well. So you're just like, you know what, I'm going to take and time yourself, because oftentimes the things that we avoid don't take very much time at all to do.
Yeah.
But thinking about it, it actually wastes so much more time. It's like every time you pass by your office desk, you're like, oh, I should do that. Oh, I should do that. I should like, put things away. And when you calculate the amount of times you think about doing a task, it's actually so much more than the act of doing the actual task.
Totally makes sense.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I could see that being true. It's incredibly frustrating for me because I know, but I literally every single time it just keeps piling until I literally can't function. And
Mm-hmm.
then that's when I kind of clear everything
You
out.
blitz it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that does make sense as far as, because it's literally as simple as just turning around in my chair and then just putting
Yeah.
everything, where it all belongs. Everything's labeled very nicely and beautifully,
Mhm.
and it does all have a home, but yet it's still kind of like all over the
Yeah.
desk area.
And
So including like cups and like snacks and like my
mhm.
smoothie and a drink and
Yeah.
lunch or whatever
Mhm.
else. Um,
You know,
so
one of the things I train my kids as well is I say like scanner, which means scan the room. So anything that doesn't belong in the room, like let's say you're going to the kitchen, right? And you're like, okay, just gonna do a quick scan of my table. Okay, I'm gonna take this bowl, my cup, empty glass, bring it with me, so that you're actually amplifying your productivity. You're not just simply going to the kitchen, you're also putting things back to where it belongs as well. So when you're able to actually attune your sight and actions to it as well, it just makes it so much easier. It's like, the kids go into the bathroom and they take a shower, but they leave their clothes on the floor. And I'm like, scan the room, scan the bathroom. What doesn't belong in this bathroom? And then so they pick up the clothes and put it into the clothes hamper. So it's just all about like once you practice it enough as well, it'll just become like this daily habit that you won't even think twice about. And you go into this flow state of mind too. So which is really powerful, especially for like busy entrepreneurs like yourself too, because it helps you. You actually get flashes of brilliance and inspiration when you're in that alpha state of mind as well. It's like, when you're driving or you're doing things kind of like on autopilot, you don't really have to think too much about. So it's the same with putting things away, like, or cleaning, so it becomes like this relaxing, almost meditative practice as well. And that email that you've been thinking about composing or replying to, oftentimes the answer will come into your mind.
makes sense.
Hmm.
What would you consider a successful home? What does that look like to you? A home that's like successful.
A home that is,
That's like they're following all of the stuff,
yeah,
but
yeah,
of course, like you said, there's still a dumping ground that you have.
yeah,
So, but like, so what's the turnaround on that? What would you consider, not that we're all perfect and it's all going to
yeah.
be roses, but like, what would you consider a successful functioning home? What does that look like?
I would say it's a home that supports you, a home that's a sanctuary, that's not a storage as well, and a home that supports who you are now and who you are becoming. You're not burdened by the past. And oftentimes that's lurking in lots of little corners of our home.
Yes. What
And
would you say? What?
you have to define it. You define success, and that's part of the I think that's part of the magic of the method as well, because what you define as success, what you define as so-called perfect, is going to look different. For some people, they want their home to look like Home Edit, right? Like all matchy clear containers, all that kind of stuff. That brings them a lot of joy. For some other people, they might be, eco warriors that they're like, what, I just want to repurpose everything, like boxes and stuff. It might not be matchy, but it's still
Yeah.
highly functional, like, and
Yeah.
that's what I advocate for. Like I don't use matchy. Like I have some containers, but for the most part, I try to just repurpose whatever boxes that come along the way. And when you're ready to upgrade, then you upgrade it. But for the time being, you define what function and success means in your household.
Yeah. All of my dressers are lined with shoe boxes. The
Exactly.
tops and the bottoms of the shoe
Yeah.
boxes, and they work perfectly to keep
Yeah.
everything aligned and everything, up straight and boxed in nicely.
Yeah.
What would you say to females who
Hmm.
are new mothers? So
Yeah.
for me, myself, my son's 18.
Yeah.
My fiance is capable of taking care of himself. That's why the house
Mhm.
stays pretty clean. I
Yeah.
trained my son at a very young age about
Mhm.
chores and taking care of himself. He's been doing all his things all by himself since like age 12. So we're
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
But when I was a new mom, that's a whole nother story. So what's some
Mhm.
advice that you'd give to some females who have young children, new babies and a
Mhm.
little 2 or 5-year-old, and you're
Mhm.
trying to keep house?
I say just be gentle with yourself. Like I think a lot of times people get really caught up in the social media narrative as well, which is very toxic. If you are going to align yourself with that notion of perfect and success, right? And it's like the whole Pinterest perfect thing. It's like, oh, if my home doesn't look like that, then it's like then I'm a failure. A lot of times people feed into that. And so I would say just be really gentle with yourself. You define what success means. And also, like we go through various chapters of our lives as well. This might just be that messy chapter, and you also what matters most. It's not about being stressed. You don't want your baby or your toddlers to be seeing you like rage cleaning, right? Like that's not going to
Totally.
have that positive effect on them. They're going to be scared. They're going to think that it's like, they're going to think it's a really negative thing. And it, quality time, that's what matters most, especially when kids are young too. So when we're able to, because this is also part of the KonMari method, we imagine our ideal lifestyle. So you're able to align yourself with your core values.
Okay.
So then you're able to recognize it's like, you know what, this is really important to me. Like I want to show up for my family and my friends, and that starts from taking care of myself, all those kinds of stuff. So I do say to young moms, especially, that make sure that your home is supported, but then and then when you start to view it as an act of self-care, it's a lot easier to just maintain it as well, and then you can be a lot more mindful about what's incoming into the house, because a lot of times we have well-meaning friends and relatives who might be giving a lot of gifts and stuff. It gets overwhelming. So then when
Yeah.
we're able to like understand, like, okay, you know what, like, because if you're just taking things and then like opening everything, then that's going to add to the amount of clutter toys we have in the house, right? So when we're able to have that clear mental audit of everything that we have in the house, from the baby clothes to the toys and whatnot, you're able to be like, hey, you know what? Like I already have something so similar, so I can pass it on to somebody else, or I can re-gift it. Um, that's one thing that one of my clients all love, is to have a gifting corner. So if things that you received might not spark joy, or you feel like you already have duplicates of it, especially birthday parties, right? Like then put it into your gifting corner so you can shop from your own home. So it's like when you don't have to actually be scrambling to go and buy a present when that birthday party that you get invited to rolls around. I have a client who actually takes this to the next level. She will actually put a Post-it on each of the gifts that she puts in her gifting corner, so that she remembers who it comes from as well.
Oh
So
my
that,
God.
yeah, so it doesn't get regifted to the same person. I was like, that's genius.
That is genius.
Yeah.
Speaking of this, I'm glad that you're kind of flowing into this
Mhm.
here, because Christmas is on its way.
Yeah.
Do you have any tips as far as not getting the clutter, not getting the conversations that we should be having, or
Mm.
how do you suggest maybe someone handle that? Or were they getting stuff that they actually appreciate versus
Exactly. I mean, there's so many studies done on this, where actually experiential gifts are so much more powerful than physical gifts, right? Like, and kids actually remember those gifts so much more. So we have this thing where we within amongst our family as well, we make it a point to gift experiential or edible gifts. Because you eat it, you share it with other people, and then it doesn't actually take up space as well.
I
So
love
those
that.
are my two favorite types of gifts. And then with kids as well, we live in this instant gratification world where literally it's like same day delivery for so many things. It's so different from how it was for us growing up. And so I love teaching the concept of waiting on your wants, because a lot of times we're like, I want it, I want it, I want it. But when you actually wait on it and you go back to it again, same applies for adults. So you can add it to your cart, but just wait a week. Unless it's something that you're like, I definitely need this, and it's a really confident purchase. If it's just kind of like, oh, it's just a want, not a need, keep it in your cart, wait a week, and then just see, do you still really want / need it?
Yeah.
So, yeah,
I've
with the
totally done that.
yeah, and it's actually so much more gratifying because that it's something that was really mindfully thought through. It's an intentional purchase.
Yeah.
So, like, I think Christmas is the holiday season is challenging because we all get sucked into that vortex as well. But when you're able to clearly say, like, okay, you know what, you have this much, we have like a discussion with the kids as well. And then they're able to recognize, like, oh, these are the gaps that they want to be filled. And if it's something like a high ticket item, then it might just be like, hey, pulling in a few people to get that one gift rather than everyone individually getting lower ticket items that
Got it.
junky.
Yeah, for sure. I want to thank you for all of that. I want to acknowledge those that are watching live. Thank you so much for being here and hanging out with Rebecca and I while we chit chat. If you are watching on the replay, make sure you hashtag replay so that we know where you are and where you are watching from. But I want to ask Rebecca, as we are wrapping up here, obviously we're getting an idea of what your business is, but tell us a little bit more about your business, what exactly you do, where people can find you, and all that goodness.
Yeah, so I guide people to declutter to create more space for joy. It's an introspective method of tidying so that you're not only decluttering your space, but you're actually creating new mental space as well to focus on what matters most in your life, so you're able to flow through life and just live more lightly and more joyfully. You can find me over at sparkjoyandflow.com, and I'm also on Instagram and on Facebook as well. I also have a Facebook group too, so there's a lot of freebies in there. What else is there? On my website, there's also checklists too. So if you want to get started and you need some support, then you can just reach out via the website. And I'm excited to guide more people to create more space for joy.
Awesome. What's your big dream for your business?
Gosh, it's just to help people, to guide other people to be able to see through that brain fog of clutter, and so that they're able to be who they're destined to be. Yeah, I do help a lot of high profile people as well, and it always just amazes me because they look a certain way in the public eye, but then when you go into their home, I'm just like, man, like, you're really struggling, And so just to be able to help them, I'm just like, you're already at the top of your game and you live in this kind of condition, right? Like, just let's lessen that load. Let's live more joyfully. Like, life we don't have to be going against the current. And a lot of the times that's like a stress response. That's how we're operating at, but we have a choice. And that's the beauty of the method as well. We have a choice in how we choose to keep things in our life and how we choose to let go of the less than pleasant things in our life too, so that we don't hold resentment and bitterness in our heart. That's where the gratitude practice comes in. When we're thankful for all of the experiences, all of the people, let's say that it's a toxic relationship and you're letting go of items that from that relationship, you don't just throw it away flippantly. You actually have to think, okay, I'm grateful for this because I now know that I will no longer allow myself to be treated this way. Right? So then when we're able to actually pinpoint these things and create those linkages, it helps us to just let go and just move forward to where we need to be.
Yeah. Why do you do what you do?
Oh, because it brings me so much joy to be able to see other people live in flow, because then that means that you are amplifying their superpowers. When your home environment is not, when the foundation is built on sand, right? Like if your home is not supporting you, your foundation is built on sand. Whatever you do on top of that, it's you're going you're actually going against the current. So there's a lot of resistance. You can be doing all the work, right? All the self-care, going to see therapists, all those kinds of things as well. But when you wake up and your home is not supporting you, you're like doing all these things to take a few steps forward, but you're going back a few steps every day just by living in that kind of environment. So I often say that, this is we need to get you to baseline, and then everything, it'll only amplify all the other beautiful, inner work that people are working towards.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then that reflects in your work as well, right? And how you
Yes.
live your life.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
100, definitely. Well, I
Mm-hmm.
so appreciate you being here, hanging out with us, sharing some of your awesome goodies of what you do for your world and your community. Any closing thoughts before we wrap up here?
There's no shame in asking for help. I come across a lot of people who feel really embarrassed, and I say to them, I was like, there's nothing to be embarrassed about. You might not be naturally born organized, but it can be a learned trait. So first step is always asking for help, right? And to have that recognition that it's not something to be ashamed of. So, just look at it from, I often say, like, I feel like I'm a personal trainer, like I have a personal trainer myself too, because I know that if I work out myself, I can do it for free, watch YouTube videos and stuff, but I'm not going to get the same effects as getting a personal trainer. You get someone to help. If you feel like you're struggling with organizing, just ask for help. Like, there's so many, it's just a simple Google search nowadays, right? There's always, like, the answer is literally at your fingertips.
Yeah.
The solution is right there. Don't be afraid of asking for help. You won't regret it. Most of the time, people say to me, I wish I had done this earlier.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Mm.
So one more time for those listening on audio, what is your website and your social media? Where do you hang out at on social media?
So I am on Instagram. I'm not as active anymore. That's also another thing that I'm letting go of more and more, because your time is precious. But I am on Instagram and Facebook, Spark Joy and Flow, and then my website is sparkjoyandflow.com. Yeah, thank you so much, Sabrina. If you need help, just send me pictures, as well. Sometimes
Love
you
it.
just need that extra little boost, like someone to be like, oh my gosh, you did amazing, because that actually adds to your dopamine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Well, I so appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for taking some time in your day to hang out with me and Her Nation and share all of your goodies here on the Her Version podcast. For those of you watching live and on the replay, if you resonated with Rebecca and all the goodness that she shared, make sure to reach out to her at sparkofjoyandflow.com. And then she can also be found under the same name on Facebook and Instagram. We love to connect people here on this platform in order to continue to help us all rise. Ooh. I will be watching this later. I'm sorry I missed you too. I love Spark Joy. Just the t-shirt trick to stand them up in the drawer was a revelation. Thank you guys. That's awesome. All
Love
right.
that.
Well, we are closing up here. Thank you so much for joining us here on Her Version. This community is expanding every single day and is filled with females who are striving to do better than they did yesterday. For those of you that are new to this podcast and like content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button, follow, like, and share. If you have an amazing story to share or struggle to triumph, be sure to reach out to me at hernation.life. As I said before, my name is Sabrina Victoria. I am the host of this podcast. And I love sharing a space with individuals to share their truth and inspire others. As always,